Still, you will notice there is no theme music.
Got to work on that.
Yeah, I asked the AI gods and to try and make us some really cool groovy music. It didn't work.
Didn't happen.
Well, I had this idea. I was trying to mix banjo and heavy metal.
Surely there's a heavy metal banjo band out there somewhere.
It probably is, but AI cannot replicate it. We found its flaws.
That's why we are more advanced than AI and forever will be, because we know that there is such things as heavy metal banjo.
Right. We've beaten it. Skynet 0. Brothers Gaden 1. All right, welcome to the Brothers Gaden podcast, where us two former Australian Special Forces brothers, that's us, we wax lyrical about all things to do with high threat environment training, disaster preparedness, combatives, physical fitness, medical expertise, emergency, disaster preparedness, hunting, tracking, situational awareness. Anything I'm missing off the list?
Martial arts.
Martial arts. That's what we're going to talk about today. So, my name is Stuart.
My name's Anthony.
Not going to use a title.
Dr. Gaden.
Doctor. It's important, really, and I'm going to elucidate why that is important later on. Today we are talking about martial arts, various martial arts, what is useful in the world of martial arts as it pertains to being able to actually fight in the real world.
So combat versus sports martial arts, basically what we're talking about here.
Yep.
There's a huge difference. I think we'll get into that a little bit more as we go along, but I think what we're going to talk about, given our background, is about combat martial arts.
Yes. Well, should we start with our backgrounds?
Sure. So we'll start with yours. We'll give a rundown of what background you have, what experience you have in martial arts.
Well, I first got exposed to martial arts, I want to say at the tender age of, what, been 8? 8, somewhere around there. In ninjutsu, the art of the ninja, at a particular school down in Melbourne, which may or may not have been since debunked and become rather disreputable, but
It still exists.
it does still exist.
And it was a good basis. I do still believe, regardless of the legitimacy of the organisation, the lessons learnt within that organisation that we've learnt, and yes, we both did ninjutsu as in our younger years, was something that held steady throughout this entire martial art history that we'll give to you today.
Yeah, so, like, it didn't necessarily need to be the most authentic. We didn't train under masters in Japan, but you know, I've got a legit certificate that says I'm a ninja. Right? I'm not just waxing hyperbole here. We are ninjas.
I have belts. I have belts that say these things on big gold certificates.
So that's where we started as young. Well, you weren't as young as I, but we started there, or I started there. I then, in my teenage years, so I dropped out of ninja and then didn't do anything for a while. And then my teenage years, I took up a little bit of Wing Chun Kung Fu. Not for very long, but, you know, I learned a few of the kata, a bit of the form, you know, for it. Then I think the next exposure I actually got to martial arts again was after I was in the army, and we did a bit of boxing training there. So did a bit of that, and then the military self-defense and close quarter fighting, the CQF element from military. That's not the full extent. After leaving the army, I guess I did a number of other things. So did a bit of Aikido. Actually, no, when I was in the army, I did a little bit of Kinjutsu as well.
Nice.
Yeah, not a lot, just a taster. Then outside of the army, did a bit of Aikido. I dipped my toe into BJJ and decided that I did not grok with that.
Didn't like the man hugging?
Didn't like it at all.
Too sweaty, too close.
Yeah, the smell of other men pressed up against me. I didn't vibe that. I've always been a striker. Like, I like the distance sort of stuff. You know, I like to keep my distance from people.
Look, nah, I'm a hugger. Definitely a hugger.
Oh, yeah. It's my introvert coming out, though. You know, I don't want to get close to people. And then more recently, have taken up a bit of Western martial arts and started a bit of sword fighting in the Schlachtschule, the German version of medieval sword fighting. I think that's about my extent.
Yeah. Which is pretty wide, pretty expansive sort of set of skills there. But I like, and look, my journey isn't too dissimilar. Funnily enough, we grew up in similar circles, being brothers, and moved through similar circles as in the military as well. So it would have led us in a lot of the same directions. So yes, I started in ninjutsu when I was young, trained for that for quite a many years, eventually leaving it when I went to the military and for other reasons. But in the interim, I did a little bit of kickboxing, started to get introduced to this new thing called MMA at the time. And that was coming through. It was totally new. But I was snapped by the army, went into the army, still had this desire to learn the martial arts, went to boxing, found all through these years and all through the martial arts that I did is that a lot of the principles were saying I was relearning the same principles over and over again. From boxing, went to kenjutsu, and I did that for quite a number of years with quite a few of my mates in there. And I still train in it from time to time.
With just want to stop there, pause a little second on kenjutsu, because quite often when I tell people I did kenjutsu, they look at me and go, "What? What is kenjutsu?"
Awesome questions. Kenjutsu, the art of the Japanese sword. I think of it almost as the equivalent of the samurai's martial art. There is some unarmed combat to it, there's some knife fighting to it, but it's mainly either with a single or the dual sword. So when you think about the samurai, this is the art that they taught, and this art that they learnt. I was taught by an old Japanese master, the classic old Japanese gardener. He's literally a old Japanese samurai man that does landscape gardening out in Western Australia. And he is the one that taught us. He learnt that with a couple of my other mates, and yeah.
Was his name Miyagi?
Very close. He's Mr. Morozumi, Age Morozumi. And I'm not sure, he could be still alive today. Look, he was old when I met him. He was old when I finished training. And I'm pretty sure, but he was full of vitality, super fast. This is a guy in his 70s that could move lightning fast before you could even blink, would have a sword at your throat. And that did not change regardless of how old he got. So kenjutsu, then BJJ, did that from time to time. Never found any real big rank in BJJ, but it's something I did quite often around different clubs and various spaces.
You never achieved the rank of man hugger. Is that an official rank in BJJ?
I believe it is somewhere around sort of, brown or purple belt.
Yeah.
You're an official man.
Brown makes sense to me. Brown belt, yeah.
No, never quite got to those dizzy heights. But yeah, similar story all through martial arts and the combat training that we learnt throughout the special forces, the unarmed combat. That was super interesting. So we were taught by another ninja actually in unarmed combat, but the principles again was exactly the same, but they were taught to a more depth, a more focused sort of area of this is what you've got to do, A, control people, or B, take them out, kill them. It was not a sport, and it brought into real focus the training that we had to do.
That I think was one of the key things that really shone a light on this whole idea of the difference between martial arts for kind of martial arts sake, or point scoring martial arts, to something that has a real world combative and potentially lethal outcome. Was the difference in when we were in the military, we learned military self-defense, and that was all about capturing, holding, maneuvering people, but there was a use of force element in it that didn't quite reach the upper echelons. Then we went into CQF, where you're looking at special forces now, and they started really introducing this idea of things like sentry elimination, like taking out people.
For those of you that don't know, CQF is close quarter fighting.
And that's kind of like the, well, at least the Australian version. I'm not sure what other militaries do this, probably quite a few, but it's the Australian Special Forces techniques for hurting people, killing people.
Yeah, well, unarmed or hand-to-hand combat. I'm pretty sure most militaries in would have a version of this. It'd be pretty neglect of them not to. And I dare say, again, most of them will suffer the same principles. Now, where I learnt a lot of my principles was actually a little bit outside of all these martial arts. It was during my training, but it was during my study of martial arts. Reading the book from Bruce Lee, understanding his principles for fighting, watching him move. I grew up in the area where Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris were the biggest people out there in the cinema, and their principles held fast, held steady throughout any and all martial arts. This includes boxing, this includes weaponry work. It is all the same.
Yeah, there's a lot of commonalities throughout the different martial arts that I think we'll talk on maybe a bit later on this. What permeates through martial arts and the rules that you can kind of take away from these sorts of things and go, right, this is actually what they're getting to. They might have different ways of getting to it, might have different methods of getting there, but in reality, they're all kind of talking about the same thing. In the way you sort of think like religion maybe is really speaking to the same thing. We're just wrapping it in a different story, or we're talking to a different dude in the sky or whatever. The idea of martial arts really comes from this core thing, and if a martial art is any worth its salt at all, it will adhere to some of these commonalities that we see throughout most martial arts.
For sure, and there's one thing I've really noticed now that I've taken up the study of medicine is the human anatomy, the understanding of how leverage works, of how your muscles work, and being able to utilise those within the martial arts field. I think it's just greatly expanded now that I understand how the body moves and why it moves. It has different strengths and different profiles, different positions, different stances, and using different leverage. Now, when I grew up learning martial arts, I was a small character. I was only a small child. I was often fighting what I say giants and gladiators because they were huge. But I had to learn a way how to get around and beat these people. I used to get floor wiped with me often, but it improved my style to know that I could still beat them as a small person using the principles of leverage and technique.
I also did get beaten up by larger people, usually you, but I remember, this is an interesting story actually. I was in the junior class in ninjutsu, and I wasn't massive or anything, but I was a little bit bigger, but because I was always battling with you, you were quite a senior person there, you're actually instructor there. I was probably a little bit better than, well, I wasn't probably a little bit better, I was definitely a little bit better than a lot of the other juniors. And I remember there was like a week period where I was just mopping the floor with kids, to the point like it was like, you'd call it bullying, I guess. So the Ninja Masters thought it was a great idea to upgrade me into the senior classes from then on. And they also, I think, I would imagine, worded everyone up that, hey, this kid's been beaten up on the little kids and he thinks he's big shit. So let him learn the lessons that he needs to learn. It was an immensely humbling period of my life where I used to rock up to Ninja and just have, like, as a, I don't know, 10, 11-year-old, and have like 14, 15, 16-year-olds just belt the absolute living snot out of me for half an hour. But you know, it certainly humbled me, and it made me really think about one of the key principles that I think permeates all good martial arts is that it's not used as a tool of oppression. It's not used to put people down. It's not used necessarily to make the world a worse place. It's kind of coming from a place of trying to improve yourself rather than destroy others.
Absolutely. I think, look, part of that training teaches you need to be a good team member, a good partner in fighting. So whether you're better than or worse than them, you need to adjust to your fighting partner and be able to help teach them and bring them along the way. I think martial arts brings to it that, you know, you learn your limits. You learn that if you step out of line, you will get a punch in the nose. And you learn to adjust to your limits. You know what other people's limits are. So my honest belief is that teaching martial arts should be for all young people. And whether that being, again, boxing, kickboxing, or some other martial art, it doesn't matter. But the discipline that comes with it and the realization that you can get hurt and people can hurt you in the world, but you can defend yourself, is a great confidence builder for kids as you're growing up.
Personal opinion here, wait for it, comes a patented Gad's rant. Not enough people get punched in the face nowadays.
True, absolutely true.
Agree? Yeah.
I absolutely agree. I think there would be a lot less lack of manners with a few more broken noses.
Yeah, yep, definitely. Now, the other part of ninjutsu was actually being a ninja. Sneaking around in the dark, sneaking into places, doing, what would you call it, clandestine type activities.
And those skills absolutely were invaluable once we got into the military. I don't know about you, but I used them all the time, and I loved using those skills. When I went and did my recon course as part of the parachute battalion, and then later on, literally became the closest thing I think you could ever become to a modern day ninja. So part of the counter-terrorism museum silent approach team for the Olympics coming up in Sydney in 2000. We were stealth on 2 feet, silenced weapon, wearing your ninja hood, looking around corners, just sneaking in through buildings silently, using all those techniques. We relearnt them in the military, but that basis that we had from learning them as a ninja, as a kid, was absolutely invaluable.
I was a commando, so I just ran through walls a lot. No, sneakiness was still...
Screaming and yelling.
It was a blunt instrument, but sneakiness was still good. It still serves me well. And I find that even now, the mindfulness of how I walk around and how much other people don't think about that, how much noise other people make, how overt a lot of people are. For me, I think really the payoff was probably in hunting, when I started going hunting and learning to move around that terrain and be silent, and how to move through an area without being seen necessarily. That was the real kicker. And not necessarily knowing that I knew that either. Like, it was just something that was taught from a young age.
Yeah. And I think it's an act of mindfulness too. So when, again, going back to the military, getting taught in the jungles how to do ghost walk, how to walk slowly, how to lift your feet up high, place them down, feel the terrain under your feet before you take each step, because you don't want to break that branch, you don't want to trip over, you don't want to knock that rock. That was the thing that we learned all the way back from the ninjutsu days that applied directly to our military service.
The ghost who walks. Phantom joke. Our dad used to say that it was the Phantom. I'm still not convinced that he wasn't.
No, but yeah.
Anyway, that kind of brings me to one of the commonalities that I've seen in a lot of martial arts that I've done, is that they require actually a high level of mindfulness. What we would call mindfulness nowadays, understanding how your body works, understanding how you're moving through space and what you are actually affecting. It's not random. It's not as simple as it looks on the outside, where it's just swinging punches and connecting kicks and things like this, or tackling or grappling or whatever. There is actually a deeper level to it in a innate understanding of your own physical being.
Absolutely. And I think knowing where your body is in space and time. So knowing, learning, part of the martial arts is learning how long are your arms or legs? How far does someone need to be before you can kick them or you get kicked by them? That kind of realisation. Actually, I wouldn't mind spinning off a little bit here. Is tell me a little bit what you think about the weapons training that you've done.
The weapons training, so I've done some blunt weapons with Ninja. So there was some staff and some nunchuko. Then a little bit of knife work here and there, and then obviously the sword work that I've done more recently. This I was actually just thinking about that when you were describing this, is understanding how your body moves through space, understanding the dimensions or the reach, the limit, your sphere of influence that you have with your hands and your feet. Then adding something in there as the next layer on top of that. And some people start with that as well. Some people just come into it. So I'm training with people who this is the first time they've ever done any sort of martial arts, is put a sword in their hand and they're swinging around hitting people. But I do notice too, I still miss people every now and then with a sword, but I certainly miss people, I would say anecdotally, less than other people who are at the same level as me. And I think that's due to understanding innately that kind of reach or that kind of extension, so that weapon is actually just an extension of my body. And once I get it in my head, once I've built that picture of how long that is and what I can actually do with it, then I don't think about, all right, I have to swing it this far or go this far, do whatever with it.
And that's exactly what I was sort of wanted to get to, is that weapon, no matter, regardless of what it is an extension of your body. If you use it not long enough and wield it with enough technique and mindfulness, it will soon become an extension of your body. You will know every part of the weapon and where it is at any stage. And I think that is part of the weapons training. Tell me about your favourite weapon.
M4.
Interesting. Okay. So, no, that looks fair enough. And I think there absolutely is a continuum from fist to foot to melee weapons to throwing weapons to projectile weapons. And I think that should all be, you can't really separate them in the path of martial arts. We've been fortunate in our experiences where we've been able to cross all that spectrum, and we go back and forth across it all the time. We go out, maybe do some hunting or some shooting for a while. We go back to the melee weapons, go back to the hand and the fist, and then go back to the wrestling, the really close sort of work. For me personally, mine is the melee weapon, is the sword. I believe with a sword in my hand, there is very little that can defeat me when I've got a sword in my hand, regardless of where that be. Because I'm much more attuned to it. I've done a lot more training perhaps in that domain. Given that, I still think and I still recommend that the greatest weapon anyone has had is the one between your ears. It is your mind. So I often say, look, I never need to carry a weapon because my enemies will bring enough for all of us. So I don't need to have a weapon because I know how it can distract them, it can take how that weapon can tie them up and restrict a person. So I now have be able to use my enemy's weapon against them. And if I need to take it off them, I know the techniques for that, how to get past that as well. But it comes back to it, if I had a choice, I would have a sword in my hand.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I love knives. Not necessarily knife fighting, but I just love knives as a tool, using them, and because I use them so much, I feel very comfortable with a knife and feel like I can do a lot of damage with a knife. But it is, with the training that I'm doing at the moment, maybe it's just a topical thing or it's just novel for me, but the European longsword is definitely climbing the ranks for me, getting more and more comfortable with that and enjoying using that and seeing how it can actually work as well. Beyond it, not just seeing it anymore as the Hollywood version of a hack and slash sort of like chop their heads off type weapon, but how it can actually be utilized in very subtle ways to cause devastating injuries.
I do like, just my brief glimpse on the European martial arts, is that how close they are to the Eastern martial arts, how they follow the same principles and almost the same verbatim techniques, and they've organically grown these techniques in totally different terrains. I find that super interesting.
Yeah. Again, that's what I was sort of talking about before, the commonalities between the martial arts that I've done. Some of them are totally disparate. Like they wouldn't have really come into contact with each other outside of the modern world that we have. And yet there are things that mimic each other. Like every martial art's different. It's all got a different idea to do it. But the human body can really only work in so many ways. And you can see that things will progress in certain ways to hit almost a point of eventuality. So yeah, the styles are different. The Italian style of medieval sword fighting is different from the German style of medieval sword fighting, which is different from what samurai or Japanese were doing at the same time. But there are huge commonalities between those sort of disciplines.
Which I think comes back to human anatomy. As you said, a human body can only move in so many directions with certain types of speed, certain types of deliverance, and especially when wielding weapons, there's only a certain amount of ways that you can use it. Now this comes into the tactics or the chess game once you start getting to fighting and using weapons. Once you've trained and you know a few of these principles, more than the techniques, a few techniques might help, but once you know them, you then will know your opponent's movements, because they'll only have an option for 1, 2, maybe 3 different movements, and you can prepare for those. And that's how you become the better fighter than the person, because you know what they're going to do next and how that chess game will play out in the next 1, 2, 3, 4 moves and what comes next.
So here's an interesting point for you that came into my mind when you were talking about the weapon between your ears. Discipline is the greatest weapon a martial artist has. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah. I think the discipline to train yourself, to train your body, to know your environment is absolutely the greatest weapon that you'd ever have. And again, the discipline to learn your objectives, to know your techniques, to do the study day in, day out, regardless of season, weather or terrain, to keep going through it and to understand all the variances and variabilities of these fighting techniques. That's the discipline.
There is no martial art that I can think of that is worth anything that you could not even master, that you could get okay at in a short period of time.
No. There's some things you can do. You can say, look, here's some reactive stances and some things you can do if you're in trouble, and you can work on those, but there's nothing that works better than a long-term training plan and discipline. I do want to put one caveat in this. One of my favourite sayings is that you say for a fight is no be there. Don't be there. Or this is using that weapon between your ears. Don't be in the space of the fight. Don't be in the space of the fist. Don't be in the space of the sword when it comes down. Just don't be there.
Yeah, that kind of speaks to what I was getting at with the discipline side. Often you say the word discipline, and people think that it's making your bed every morning and sitting on your knees in the pouring rain and doing, I don't know, push-ups or something.
Sure, I've done that before.
Like, yeah, there's all stuff that we've done before, right? But that isn't necessarily the discipline that I'm talking about. There's a discipline, there's that muscle within your brain that you work out consistently and keep doing. It's when you don't want to do something, when you don't like doing something, when you're not feeling up for doing something, that you still step into it and do that thing. It isn't just making you better at the martial art. It's making you better at something that's very intangible, that you're going to be able to control your mind. You're going to be able to control what you do in a situation because you continually have done that. You've tested yourself again and again. And that can come down to somebody picking you in a fight and you understanding it instead of reacting, instead of getting emotional and falling into that, going, no, actually what's going on here? I'm in control of who I am. I am disciplined here. And I might have the ability to actually go, no, I don't want to be in this, and step away from the fight, back away, or understand that, yep, this is a situation that I want to be near, and get away from that situation altogether.
Yeah, I think that discipline of walking away, not being above your own ego, and that discipline that you spoke about a little bit earlier about putting yourself in hard situations and describing it as a muscle is probably perfect, because there literally is a part of your brain, given every hard situation that you put yourself in, literally grows like a muscle in your brain every time you do it. So every time you add a little bit of discipline, it grows a little bit stronger and prepares yourself for the next opportunity, just like anything else that you do in your world.
Yes. Well, there is also something to talk about when it comes to the actual physical part of training for these sorts of things. That is important. It's not the be-all and end-all, though. Agree or disagree?
Training for these things, in which part do you mean?
Do you need to be a world-class athlete to be good at martial arts?
Probably not a world-class athlete, but you need to have trained. It's important you've put the time in. If you don't put the time in, you won't get the results out. And it doesn't have to be a description of a world-class athlete. You don't have to be the fittest, the strongest, the biggest, the best, but you need to know your techniques. Martial arts to me is, and this is again, comes from a background, I was small. I didn't have any of those advantages in life. I needed to know technique and I needed speed. And they're the two things that I needed. Everything else would develop from those. And you just practice those techniques over and over again.
I have noticed that some of the masters, if you will, of certain martial arts, some of the people that you would think of as the best, aren't exactly physical specimens. They're not Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime. They're quite often old, for starters, like Mr. Miyagi or Morozumi, that's the one. Bless you. Mr. Morozumi, old guy. Some of my sword teachers, I would say, rotund. The actual discipline that I do comes from, like, the lineage of it is a guy who's over in the States, and I watch the videos and look at the photos of this guy, and I'm like, this guy's overweight. Like, there's no two ways about it. But the dude can sword fight. Like, it's not linked to his physical being. Quite often you think, oh, martial artist, Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, like, those dudes were specimens. They were something to behold.
Yeah. But I think it's important to note that you can do martial arts regardless of your body type, regardless of your size and your shape. and you need to implement your advantages and disadvantages. To say that this one way and that there's set rules to do it totally breaks the principles of martial arts. Is to be fluid, to be adaptive, and you can do that regardless if you've got one leg, one arm, missing a nose. It doesn't matter, missing two eyes. You can still do martial arts. You don't have to have any of these so-called physical attributes that you apply, that you think an athlete would have.
Be like water,
Exactly.
as my friend Bruce would say. Bruce.
Good old Bruce.
Good old Bruce. Anything else? Anything else you'd like to chuck in there?
Look, I think we've covered a fair bit tonight on about martial arts and about our sort of experience with it. I think it's just a matter of look for people that are interested in it, find your martial art, find your art that works for you, and just get out there and do it and train often. And you need to envelop it and make it part of your life.
Yeah, that's quite often when I do little self-defense courses or things like that, and people ask, hey, what should I do to do more of this? Where should I go? My usual recommendation is, because I might not be in the city where they're from, so I don't know the exact best place for them to go to, but I say just try a couple of different disciplines and find what you like. Find somebody who you get along with, that you actually enjoy as a teacher, that you like being around, that you can learn from. That's some key things there that you can actually learn from this person, because there are some very experienced, good martial artists out there who are total assholes, like are unbearable. I can't stand to be around them, and so I'm not going to learn anything from this person. I can't get over it. Like, they're just too annoying for me. So if you can find someone that you like, you get along well with, and you like the system, it's much more likely that you're going to be persistent at doing that. You're going to do that over a long time, or consistent in doing that. And that's more important, I think, than how good the style is. Like whether crane style is better than dragon style, or, is your karate stronger than your, ninjutsu or taekwondo. It's like, what are you going to do for a long time?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no ultimate style. You've just got to find the one that works for you.
Cool. We didn't really touch too much on what is effective and what's a sport.
No, but I think that we can do that for a...
We'll talk about that another day. Yeah. I'll tell you some stories. I'm foreshadowing now. I'll tell you some stories about a man named Blue Curran. Scary dude. Fought in World War II and then taught us how to do bad things.
Awesome. Can't wait.
That will wrap it up for this episode of The Brothers Gaden. I have been Stuart.
Anthony?
This is Anthony, my brother. And if you feel so inclined, hit the subscribe button, do all that good thing to help share the word, even actually share the word. Here's an odd idea. Go tell someone, and tell that person to tell someone as well, so that we can continue this sort of shenanigans and help spread this kind of information to the world. But yeah, stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you on the next episode.
See you next time.